Hello, hello. hopefully, hopefully this time we are here and I am here and I am so grateful to be joined by Emily Prokop today. But my name is Heather and I am the host of Sunshine and Power Cats. And this week I'm bringing to you some live streams with some amazing people that I've met over the past year and we're celebrating connections. So like I said, today I am so excited to be joined by Emily Prokop. Welcome, Emily.
Hello, hi. Thanks
Hi.
for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And yes, I have my story behind t-shirt on that I was very lucky to win from, I think it was a Patreon giveaway. Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
yeah. So it worked out well for today to have that and promote the show. But yeah, so like I said, we're celebrating connections today, and I just wanted to celebrate with you because you've made a lot of connections through podcasting. You've had 2 shows. You've currently got the Story Behind podcast, and you've just launched this year e-podcast productions, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's been very busy.
Yeah. Um, you are in a lot of like Facebook groups and things like that, and as the Story Behind podcast has gone past 100 episodes now. So if you wanted to share some of the stories that you've made throughout this podcasting journey that you want to celebrate, that would be cool.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing I would celebrate, and he is in the chat room, is Nick from Epic Film Guys because he is the main reason I'm doing the story behind. Because when my first podcast ended, I was very sad and disappointed and depressed. I basically went through a depression, and it was pretty rough, and it was also the first trimester of pregnancy, so I was crazy hormonal. But, uh, so when that happened and I couldn't even look at a microphone, and if you ask my husband, he thinks he's the one who got me behind the mic. Mm-mm. It was Nick. It it was Nick because he did this countdown on his Twitter of this many days since the last classy little podcast, and, let's see what else. He was just constantly texting with me every day, and he was there to listen as I just complained about my old co-host and how terrible his girlfriend is, and, how she Yoko Ono'd the podcast. But then there was one day when, I got a pregnancy craving for pink lemonade, and I went to the gas station and I got it, and I went back to my desk at work, and I'm drinking it, and it occurred to me, I'm like, "They pink lemons don't exist, right?" Like, I had to question it. I really had no idea. And so I looked it up and I found out the story behind it, and there were actually 2, and I was like, "This is so interesting. I have no one to tell." And it sucked. And then, like, I had that idea, "Oh, I wish I still had a podcast to talk about this on." And I was like, "That's it. That's the podcast." The first thing I did, before texting anyone else was I texted Nick, and, I was like, "Look, I have this idea for a podcast. What do you think?" And I was like, I know, like, Nick's going to be honest with me. He's not going to just be like, "Yeah, that's great. Get behind the mic. Go do that." He was like, "That's perfect. That's absolutely right up your alley. You should do that. You should do the story behind these things." And and the name even came to me like right then. So the rest of the day, I did no work, and I just worked on that idea. And yeah, so from there, I started the podcast and I was running it past Nick, and I kept giving him, I was like, "Here's the first episode. What do you think? This is what I'm planning on doing." And he was there supporting me the whole way. And then I had done a segment on his show called "Where in the World is the Lisp?" And that was a character that Justin from Epic Film Guys used to do. And I came up with that whole thing, and, so being able to sort of use that as a transition just to stay on the mic and get that project done, I was like, "Okay, all right, I'm comfortable getting back behind the mic," because at that point, I had them stored. I was ready to be like, "I don't know when I'm gonna use this again." So, being able to do that, getting that started, getting the reception that I did, getting the support from Nick and him talking about it on his show, and other people like Adam from Everyone Has a Podcast talking about it. And it was so nice to come back, and it was almost like I hadn't left, even though I think I took maybe a 4 or 5-month break. It was like nothing had changed. Everyone was so welcoming and they were like, "Oh my gosh, she's finally back." And so yeah, that was like just amazing connections I had made for my first podcast. And I mean, Nick's my oldest podcasting friend. We probably started talking, I think September, almost 3 years ago. And, it was right before Back to the Future's 30th anniversary, and we were doing a Back to the Future episode, and I had seen his name on Twitter. I'd seen Epic Film Guys on Twitter, and I was like and I felt so weird sending just, like, a cold DM to him and being like, "Hey, so you're a podcaster, and I'm a podcaster, and so we're looking for voices to talk about Back to the Future, and that's kind of an epic film, right?" And I felt so awkward doing that, and I don't know, for some reason, like, hearing back from Nick, I was just like, "Oh my god, he thinks I'm like this dumb girl with a podcast," and with a name like Epic Film Guys, they probably get these requests all the time. And I didn't know at that point they were maybe 16 episodes in and at the same time. So when I listened to them and they did a shout out to me, I was like, "Oh my god," I'm texting everyone just like, they called me out at the show that I reached out to, and they're gonna record something for me." And he was coming back from a friend's wedding that weekend that I needed it, and he was, sending me messages being like, "Well, yeah, I definitely wanna record this. I'm coming back from a friend's wedding." And I was like, "No, I'm sorry, you really don't have to do that," but it's Nick, so of course he's gonna, like, bend over backwards if you ask him for a favor, and it's just like, this guy's amazing."
He said in the chat that you belong behind that mic and you literally are a treasure. And at the time, Epic Film Guys was so young, and that would not be the show that it is today without you.
That's not true, but Nick is because Nick is amazing. He's an amazing editor, an amazing host, and I mean, it was almost like finding him when we were both at a very, very early stage of podcasting. It was like I kind of had like a brother and a mentor at the same time, just being able to bounce ideas off each other. And like we would learn something, like I would learn something and tell him, and he would learn something and tell me, and we'd tweak things together. Like I ended up getting him the mixer that I have, and he can use it better than I can. So he added a soundboard, and I was like, "Oh, that's dangerous if I did that with my old co-host." But
Yeah. It's one of those friendships that has, like you say, you were there sort of in a similar journey together, and you've been stuck together with each other over the last 3 years, and it is so awesome having that person who's in your corner and who understands you, and you can bounce ideas off and you feel comfortable sharing with, because it is, like we've said all week, there's, like, the nerves and stuff about putting things out there and you're not sure and you've got questions and all of that kind of thing. There was something I was gonna say about the welcome as well. When I met you was in a live recording of Better Podcasting, and I came into the chat there and didn't know SP and SJ really, or anyone from anything. Bandrew had recommended that I go and check them out as a resource, and you were there and you asked me what my project was. And I hadn't launched it then, so I was so nervous because it was such a weird idea in my head. And you just said, "Wow, that sounds fantastic." And it just made my heart melt and think, "Yay, there's someone who might be interested in it."
well, that's the thing is I hear about podcasts and they might not like it might not be something that necessarily strikes me, but then when I hear about it and I hear people talk about their podcast passionately, as soon as I hear that and I learn to like that person, I listen to it. I mean, most of the movies that Nick and Justin talk about, I never see. I'm never going to see them. But I love them so much that I'll listen to them talk about it and be like, "Oh, yeah, I totally agree with Nick. I also hate the Marvel villains." Meanwhile, I've seen, like, 1 Marvel movie, and then I say that in conversations of just like, "They never really write up the Marvel villains," and people try to continue the conversation. I don't know what I'm talking about other than repeating Nick.
That's awesome. I have the same thing though. The people that I have gotten to know and that I really value what they do, or just who they are as people, I will support them to the ends of the earth and follow whatever they do.
Yeah, and that's one of the really great things about podcasting too, is it's not competitive. In as far as I've seen, it's not competitive. There are a few people who are competitive, and then those people kinda get weeded out, like, it's like, "Okay, fine, go sit by yourself. Go do that, see how that works out for you." But, it's like you meet somebody, if they have a similar show to you, it's not, "Oh, well, we're competition." It's like, "Hey, let's do a collaboration. Let's do this together. Let's talk to both of our audiences," because it's such the way people consume media at this point is so Netflixy, where they just wanna binge. They wanna listen to an entire podcast. They want to finish that one and then move on to the next one that's exactly the same, and they're looking for more like that. It's not like how it was like 15 years ago before TiVo, where people are like, all right, I need to be at home 8 o'clock Thursday night to watch Friends, and whatever else is on during that slot, I'm just not going to watch. It's like, no, you have so much time to consume podcasts and listen to them whenever you want to and how fast you want to. And that's one of the things. I don't miss my job. I don't miss my commute, but I do miss having that time to listen to all my podcasts now. Now it's
Yeah.
kind of in between when I'm doing stuff like downloading files and reading and responding to emails is, "Okay, finally I can go to my podcast and listen to what I wanna listen to." And
And
yeah.
the mall walking that you were doing, you were going around the mall and walking and
Yeah.
listening to podcasts.
Yeah, that was another thing was, when I lost my commute to work, I had to figure out a way to listen to podcasts, and I was like, "Alright, I guess I'm gonna start walking," and, now that Cam, my son, gave up that morning nap, I haven't been able to mall walk, and I'm very sad.
Ah, okay.
He was like, "I'm not napping in the morning anymore, FYI."
But I need that time.
No, I know, I'm gonna have to figure out something, just, so it's like, I'll listen when I'm driving, anytime I have to go driving or when I'm in the store, and I'm notorious for wearing earbuds in stores and people are trying to talk to me like, "Hey, can I help you today?" And I'm just like,
Can't hear you. And from our live stream that I did, the unofficial live stream back in December, you mentioned about listening in the dentist, and I
Yeah.
hadn't really thought about that because I didn't take you have to turn my phone off here and just didn't think about having something in your ears because you know, it's time that you could use to do that and catch up on things.
Yeah, and my dentist, what's nice is that when you're usually doing that, Um, my dentist trying to make small talk, he's like, "Oh, so what are you listening to?" And my dentist is really into music and stuff, and I told him a podcast, and he was like, "Oh, that's interesting. What what podcast are you listening to? Maybe I should start playing podcasts here." I'm like, "You're gonna have to find the clean ones because I don't think people want to have their teeth cleaned and be listening to a raunchy comedy podcast, especially if you're gonna start laughing with a drill in their mouth." So
Has anyone found a dental hygiene podcast? I mean, that's been the running joke since December is that perhaps I may start one, possibly with Andrew or someone else in the future, but I'm not sure that I could talk about that, to be quite honest. But if there is one, maybe he could play that in the dental surgery.
that would be funny. Although, like, I would hate listening to a
Yeah.
podcast about dentistry while I'm at the dentist. I would wanna get my mind as far away as possible, be like, "Can't you put on a nice meditation podcast?" And, I mean, that's it's such a nice thing to just have all those free resources right at your phone because I've gotten more into things like meditation and mindfulness and being like, "You know what? Bet there's a podcast on it." Or when I was starting the business, oh, I bet there's a business podcast. There are tons of business
Yeah.
podcasts, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, they love their business podcasts. So, there is a podcast about everything except mall walking. I actually checked one time just to see if there's a mall walking podcast, and I was like, "I don't know what they talk about, but"
The adventures that they see while they're mall walking? I don't know.
Exactly. They could talk about the sales because at the time, I knew when all the clearance sales were and what was on sale at what store, and that one store was selling Reptar bars from the show Rugrats years ago, and I was like, "Oh my god," and I'm like, "I don't need to know this stuff," but I do.
Yeah. And your e-podcast productions that you've set up has sort of you have to listen to other podcasts while you're editing, and I saw that you tweeted or face on Facebook somewhere you had that, your husband paid off his student debt because of the tips and tricks you'd learned from the editing the financial
Yeah.
podcasts.
Yeah, that's really cool. I somehow fell into this was a connection I made. I met Steve Stewart, who is in the Podcast Editors Club Facebook group. And we kind of ran in the same circles. I knew him through Dave Jackson, and um, he knew that I really liked editing. And when he put out a class to learn to edit professionally, I was like, you know what? I'm one of those people, I need that piece of paper to say that I could do something. So when I took the class, and I was like, okay, all right, this is what I needed. And I especially needed the session about running the business and doing the business side of things and invoicing. And
Yeah.
um, that's basically, I did that. And I did so well in the class that he started giving me contract jobs. And then once he got to the point where he was taking on too many clients, he pulled some of them and said, "Hey, do you want to take on this person as your client?" And so he's very much in the financial sphere of podcasts. So those are two of my clients are financial podcasters. And I thought, I originally was very hesitant about it because I'm like, I'm going to fall asleep. This is going to bore me. I don't care. But I ended up really liking it and getting into it and hearing how these people, first of all, pay off their student loans, like, what? And they're still in their 20s, so that just blew my mind. And also, how they got out of debt and how they're basically retired in their 30s, some of them. And it's just, I don't think I'll go to that extreme, but getting some of the tips from those podcasts, just editing them and then bringing them to my husband. And when we got our tax return, I was like, okay, so here's what we should do with it. This is how we're going to allocate it, not just, buy an all inclusive trip to Mexico again, like we did one year with our tax return and then had no money for the rest of the year. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So that sort of one thing, the training that you did, on that, led to this other work, which is an incredible connection.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And at the time, when I took the training, it was something I had been thinking about. And it was like I would go to work and think about podcasts all day, listen to podcasts all day, listen to podcasts about podcasting all day. And, my ears would perk up if somebody even said the word podcast. And I would like, what? Oh, where? Huh? Huh? They could even say, they would say something like, I don't know, they'd be like, oh, it's overcast. And I'd be like, oh, real? Oh, you're talking about the weather. Okay. Just not. And, but so what happened was the end of October, after I had taken the class, I think I had maybe one more class left or I just finished. I got pulled into my boss's office and I was told that layoffs were going to happen and that I was kind of on the chopping block. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I was kind of okay with it in a weird way of just like, all right, well, there's kind of the kick in the butt that I needed to really take this seriously and start it professionally because this is what I wanted to do. I didn't just want to take the class
Yeah.
and not do anything with it. And I had taken on a client at toward the end of it and being like, wow, I can do this. This is really good. So it kind of just kicked my butt knowing that I had that end date 3 months from then. And so I was able to, I gave up sleep and basically just worked on a website, worked on a business plan, worked on marketing and clients and personal branding, which is kind of gross at first,
Yeah.
but you get used to it
Yeah.
because it's just like I had to put on my personal Instagram, like the personal one that I've been using for years, which had like ridiculous, I don't know, with like bar pictures in it. It's like, all right, guys, you're gonna see that there's also another profile that has my name in it, and that one is gonna be all podcasting. So don't feel obligated to follow it, but that's gonna be all like podcast related. I'm still gonna have this one because I know you all need your cat pictures from me. So and but I mean, it's actually become a lot of fun, and the internet isn't as scary as I always thought it was. Because I was always afraid of putting myself out there on the internet, being like, "Oh my god, someone's gonna come, they're gonna stalk me, they're gonna stalk my kids, they're gonna come to their school," and it's like, "Oh my god, nobody cares. Everyone's got their own stuff going on." It's like, um, nobody is just like, "Oh wow, you're putting yourself out there," and everyone I found in business is always really supportive as long as you're not spammy about it. And I mean, a lot of the stuff that I learned for business, as I got a hair in my mouth, uh, was stuff that I already remember learning for marketing a podcast. So I was like, "Oh, wait, really? Yeah, I know how to do that. Okay, that's great." So I mean, that was really nice.
Yeah, and also you have a connection to you're interested and passionate about the stories behind things, so if we just sort of backtrack a little bit and
Yeah.
your, work experience actually lended itself to an episode when you came back from your little mini hiatus after episode 100, so you're if we want it just if we can talk about your connection to your passion for learning about things and how that
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of one of the great things about doing the story behind is that's naturally what my brain does is I have the ADD brain of learning stuff and I want to learn stuff and if I'm not learning, I get really just complacent and kind of sluggish and it's almost like I don't have a purpose. It's like I have to be learning something at all times. So, having ADD, it's like I'll be looking around my desk and being like, why is the paperclip shaped like that? Like, what a weird shape. Who came up with that? So, when I got like all my unemployment stuff and the slip itself actually said in quotes, pink
picks
slip,
slip.
even though it was white, I was like, wow, they actually do call it that. So I looked it up and found out all the information about it. And I was like, well, there's my episode. There's the episode when I come back. And
Yeah. And
yeah, it's
the internet is kind of like a rabbit hole, you say, like, you go on those kind of things and find connections all over the show to fill in the gaps with the information for your episodes.
yeah, yeah, that was another thing was when I was doing all this stuff to kind of get ready for having a business, I took the Gallup Strengths Finder test and it was kind of I guess it's kind of a personality test, but it really focuses on how well you work, like what are your strengths when you're working and kind of not really your downfalls, but like what are the strengths that you can use in your business? And the first one that I got, like my number one strength is let's see if I can pronounce it. It's ideator, something like that, where it's all ideas. So my brain automatically makes connections between things. So that's why in the post-it episode, there are all these connections to Romy and Michelle, is because if someone says post-it, I start thinking of Romy and Michelle, and I start thinking of, you know, oh, that line in Romy and Michelle where Janine Garofalo says Art Fry invented it. So there are all the like that's just how my mind works. But it worked out really well for my show because then I have these different perspectives in it. And a lot of the stuff that I talk about, a lot of the earlier subjects and episodes were things that I just knew random trivia about. And I was like, well, how do I know that? And is that really true? And a lot of stuff I'll go to Snopes and they'll be like, no, that's just an urban legend that's been passed around. And so I love learning that too. So that when somebody else repeats it, I can say, actually, and then no one invites me to parties anymore, like ever.
One of the other cool things that you've done, though, is you've asked for guest voices on the story behind. So you've invited other people to do little clips for you, and I was so excited to send one in for the story behind in the Clue series, The Candlestick.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I originally really wanted to do just because in my old show we would play promos and that show was 45 minutes to an hour every week. But the thing was the story behind was 5 to 10 minutes. So I didn't want to have promos that took up a minute of time really because it was very short to begin with. So, but what I wanted to do was still support people in the community and other podcasters and get their voices heard and be able to still, because even if it's a solo show, nobody I know, well, I guess I wouldn't know, but nobody I know doing a solo show is completely solo. They have kind of a team around them, and if it's not an official team, it's like a bunch of friends who kind of get together and promote each other's show. Like Adam, one man show, but he is just like all over the place. Just
Yeah.
everybody knows who Adam Higgins is at this point because he's such a big part of the community, even though it's a solo show. And even though he says he's a big grump and he's not. So sorry, Adam.
We're maintaining that Adam is a nice guy.
The Adam is a nice guy club.
And so with the podcast, but also with e-podcasts, podcast productions, and in business, you have to build connections. And I kind of talked about that with Jillian yesterday because Jillian is not a podcaster. She is a virtual assistant and in social media marketing. So and strategy and stuff like that. So if you wanted to talk about how you build connections and how it has been being in the different podcasting groups and doing collaborations and things like that, that would be good.
Yeah, one of the things I was lucky to find this Facebook group very early on because I was one of the things I was the most scared about with starting a business was the marketing and the cold outreach. I hated that idea. I'm not a person at parties to go up to somebody and say, "Hey, how are you?" And I also always got a very gross vibe from the I went to podcast movement when I first started and there were podcasters out there didn't even say hi, just shoved a business card in your face and was like, "Hey, I'm this and from this podcast, and oh, what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, my friend and I have a podcast about wine and cheese," and they'd already be walking off to somebody else because clearly I wasn't, you know, entrepreneurial enough for them. And, so I found this podcast or this, Facebook group called Getting Clients Without Being Salesy, and I was like, "Okay, good, that sounds great." And they taught me so much about basically how algorithms work in Facebook and, Instagram and how they're going, and the great thing is that Instagram and Facebook are actually looking for those real connections. They are not looking for people to spam and to like and comment the same thing on every single post they see in an attempt to get more followers or get more likes. And
Yeah.
they are putting out these algorithms that actually can tell when somebody has typed a comment as opposed to copied and pasted it. Um,
And
so
scheduled post and things like that as well.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. They basically want you to use their tools. So if you do schedule something in Facebook, uh, just FYI, use the Facebook scheduler. It's
Yeah.
not that your post won't get seen if you're using something like Buffer or Hootsuite, but Facebook likes it more when you're using their tools. So, a lot of the other connections in there are things like having a Facebook group for your podcast and going live in that Facebook group because the interaction, like we're going live right now on YouTube and we're watching the chat room and the interaction in there, being able to call people out and say, "Hey, Nick's in the chat room and hashtag nice guy Adam because Adam, nice guy." Uh,
Yeah.
being able to do stuff like that. Um, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram well, Twitter not so much. Twitter is still a fire hose,
Okay.
but they're still, they're getting the hint eventually, but Instagram and Facebook, they're looking for the people who really engage with people. So, um, yeah, making those real connections, being able to be real on social media and not salesy all the time, uh, it it makes starting a business and marketing a lot easier, and it sounds so basic of just like, "Hey, go on Facebook and go on Instagram and be yourself, and if you like something, comment on it. If
Yeah.
you know, and they put different weights to things. So, you know how they have all the little emojis in, Facebook where
Yeah.
you could like, love, laugh, say wow. They actually put weights to them and they look at the posts that get the angry face. And so they're like, well, this post is getting a lot of angry faces. Let's not show it on people's feeds because it's just going to make them angry. We want Facebook to be a place of happiness and joy. So you'll see the posts that get a lot of hearts and a lot of
Yeah.
laughs. And the wows can go either way. It's really funny because there can be wow and then a lot of sad faces and angry faces, and Facebook is like, "No, I don't want this." Or it'll get the likes and the loves. So it's funny that machines are kind of learning how humans interact and penalizing you if you're not interacting like a human. So
Yeah.
I kind of like that a lot now. Because it means Facebook is much happier too. Like, I don't know about you, but the past few months since they rolled out this algorithm change, it's like Facebook is a nice place again. I don't get as angry anymore when I go on there.
That's a bit of a bonus.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing, like, I was gonna say is you've also developed at the end of last year or not the end, but near the end of the year, you developed Podcast Share, which is on Twitter, and it's an account that people can be the curator of the week for, and that's been an incredible place to build connections.
Yeah, I get so proud of my curators. Like, it's not even mine really, it's such an autonomous thing. I just organize it and, switch over to the new person every week, and, people reach out and I mean, first of all, you have to first get nominated to be a curator. So it's not like people can say, "Oh, I want to do this," because I have had people fill out the form and it's clearly themselves
Yeah.
nominating themselves. And those are ones I just ignore and I never respond to because it's like, come on, it says like three different places. Like, this isn't to nominate yourself. This is
Yeah.
so community based. I don't get anything out of it just from running it. It's just one of those things that I'm like, this is so good for the community. And even starting it up, people get to hear what podcasters listen to. And they not only bring their listeners over to be like, oh, it's not a Twitter account for just this podcast where it's, hey, listen to this episode, listen to this episode. It's like, no, you know what? This is what I'm listening to today. Adam basically um, would do that anyway. A lot of people do that anyway, of just, I'm going to share what I'm listening to this week. I'm going to share what I'm listening to today. And I doing that, I don't even know, like, why I decided to take that on. I'm just like, "You know what? Let me add one more thing to the pile of all the things." But but it's so autonomous at this point. I changed it over. I'll look at the tweets that people are sending out just to make sure, it's
Everything's on
not.
track.
Yeah, but I'm not, on top of it 24/7. I'll just look at it. And the other thing is I've gotten nothing but just seeing people positively react and um hearing about shows they've never heard about before, like Adam was saying in his, of just he finds out who the curator is and then goes and listens to their show. And I know he's not the only one who's just, because as soon as somebody does podcast share, then I see them liking and retweeting more of what other people have done, just because they're like, this is such a fun experience. And it's so easy. The software that I have, it's called Group Tweet, and what happens is I assign that person their regular Twitter account as the curator. So they don't even have to exchange passwords or go into that just to do it. They actually just send a DM to the Twitter account and it automatically turns it into a tweet from the podcast share account. So it's so great and people have done such different things with it. Like um people have asked what other people are listening to, and then I've gone in because I can control like retweeting and stuff like that, and I'll just retweet. And then last week I had a gap where I didn't have anyone up for curator, so I just put up as the pinned post, what are you listening to this week, and just retweeted them all. And it was so great. People really, it surprises me because on Twitter it can be a very self-centered platform where it's me, 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 me.
Yeah.
But the one thing about podcast share is it they know they can promote their show, but maybe there's one or two tweets a week about that at the most, and it's
Yeah.
all everybody else's shows. So I
Yeah.
love it.
It's a great place to be, and one place where it changes, so the curator changes, and that keeps it fresh and interesting, and then the connections from there, like you say, can branch out and they follow other things and follow the recommendations that people have made. But that's how I met Adam, because Adam saw that I was the podcast share curator of the week, and also, uh Jeremy Collins from Podcast We Listen To was the curator of the week, and he asked what shows drop on Sunday, and I tweeted him back, and then I got to be on Podcast We Listen To, so it was an amazing connection there for me. But it's a lot of fun, and it's interesting seeing behind the scenes stuff too that people do there, and just how they're lifting other people up as well as just engaging with each other. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love watching it. Like, I was really nervous at first about people taking advantage of it, and I haven't had to worry at all. That's another reason why I have the criteria of being nominated by somebody else, because at least I have somebody else to go to and be like, "So you nominated this person, what's their deal?" But
Yeah.
I haven't had that problem at all, and everyone has been so supportive, and it's grown basically so organically too. It's not like I did the trick out there of following a bunch of people and hoping they followed me back and unfollow the ones who don't follow back. Like it was just I'm going to follow the people who I know are going to be supportive of this,
Yeah.
who I already know, and now I think it's over I wanna say it's over 1,100 followers now, and I
Woo!
mean, I didn't do, like, any of that. That was just all organic and people bringing their audiences, and it's mostly podcasts and perfectly okay with that, so because podcasters listen to podcasts, that's just
Yeah.
how it is, and
Yeah.
I think at one point you and I were talking about how sometimes it feels like only podcasters listen to our show, but it's more podcasters are the ones who know to reach out to hosts because
Yeah.
we might not hear anything otherwise, but there are a lot of other listeners out there. Like when I was a listener before I was a host, I never talked to anybody that I listened to on a podcast. Never. And then when I became a host, I was like, oh my god, you just feel like there are crickets going on, and that's when I started leaving reviews for podcasts, that's when I started emailing, and that's when I started participating more, and, so it might feel sometimes that only podcasters listen to your show, but it's a lot of other people who are probably driving or exercising at the time that are like, "Oh, I'm sure they hear from everybody."
Yeah. But we like hearing from people too, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The one other thing I was gonna say was, about connections. You've got a book that you're working on, and if you can share how that connection came about to write the story behind the story behind?
Yeah, that was out of the blue. That was from my podcast. I got an email from a publishing company from an acquisitions editor, and she said, "I have been listening to your podcast. I work for this publishing company. If you want to take a look at our catalog of books, I feel like the story behind would make an amazing addition. Let's talk some more." And I'm like, "This is spam. This has got to be spam." And I'm like doing because I don't believe any of that. So like, you don't believe any of the stuff that actually happens to you until it's, like, set in stone, and when I looked it up, it was totally legit, and they have a really good business model, like, they don't give you an upfront stipend, like, half this and then the other half when it's done. They give you more percentage of the sales when it's actually out, so they're basically hoping that, I could do enough pre-sales and stuff like that. They're like, "Either way, you make a profit," but, uh their business model is just very much they're looking for people with an audience already. So they have a lot
Yeah.
of people with podcasts and with YouTube channels and Twitter followers. So they're really smart about that. They're not going to these authors who are just like, I don't have a mailing list. I know like 5 people. But they they reached out and I talked to them and they gave me ideas for the book and they very much let me stay in control. I was able they're like, "We're working on the covers." And I was like, "Well, here are the color swatches that I use for my branding." And they're like, "Great, we'll put it on the cover so you don't really have to like I probably don't need to change anything on my end." They're going to kind of work around that.
Oh,
And it's going to be 50 objects. You know, I actually don't remember the full title of the book. It's the story behind the extraordinary history of 50 things, I think. Um, so it's going to be 50, kind of like 50 episodes. And I think only 10 are going to be ones that I've already done episodes on. And they're just going to be expansions on that, on those 10. And then the other 40 are going to be new ones. And one of the things I did was I outlined half the book already. So I know what I'm going to do for 25 ep- episodes 25 25 chapters already, so that's really nice to have in my head. And I just have a feeling the book's due in June, and I have a feeling in March and in April I'm just going to take a week off, book a hotel for myself, and just because it's so hard to fit that in every
I
week. It's hard
understand.
enough yeah, trying to it's hard enough trying to get out an episode every week, and I used to be twice a week, but now it's like I can't because I don't have the lunch hours I used to have at work where it was just like, "Oh god, I hate being here. Let me fill it with making a podcast." But now it's like, "Oh, I really have to work on somebody else's podcast." So, but and the power outage last week, oh, that was funny. Getting to message you and saying, "I don't have powers and I don't know if my batteries are floating."
And you managed to cope and make the most of that because I mean, what can you do when you're on the grid and your power cuts out? You can't fix it. Whereas I'm lucky enough to be able to try and do something to get mine back on board. But I totally understood how it felt for you to be off the grid because it happens to me all the time.
Yeah, and especially I mean, it was fine during the day, it was light out, and it was fine, we gave the baby a bath, put him to bed. My daughter and I were playing with flashlights, and that gets old after about an hour. She's like and she's trying to talk to our Google Home the whole time. I'm just like, "It's not working. Will she ever come back?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, maybe this is a bad thing."
That's quite funny. I don't have that because I don't have the home automation and the Google, things,
Yeah.
and that is just pretty basic, but the flip side of that would be, like, knowing that the sun is out so then you can do things like watch TV instead of going outside, you know? So, it's a kind of interesting experience, but we had a couple of comments, and Adam said, hashtag "pre-order" for the story behind the book, and Nick said, "Next year on the Sunshine Summit, New York Times bestselling author and smash success podcasting entrepreneur Emily Prokop."
Oh god. You know, I'm still getting used to the word entrepreneur because 'cause I'm like, "Ugh," it still leaves a really dirty taste in my mouth
Oh, no.
because, and the funny thing is, I had to be corrected at one point because I came back from my first podcast movement, and the word entrepreneur was just thrown around like crazy, and it made me gross, and, w one of my friends, John Buchanan, who, is another podcast editor, he's like, "You know, our friend Daniel J. Lewis is an entrepreneur, right?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I do know good ones. Okay. All right. I won't hate that word, but
Nick
uh,
said you'll be a good entrepreneur. And you
are
are.
you a good entrepreneur or a bad entrepreneur?"
Everywhere I hear you mentioned, though, it's always the lovely Emily Prokop, so you'll definitely not be basketed in that bad entrepreneur pile.
I hope not. And if I am, I have a feeling Nick and you and Adam will call me out and be like, "Hey,
You are
cut this
amazing.
crap."
Yeah. Um, I am an entrepreneur, and I haven't had the only sensitive downside, for me is that what I'm doing now with podcasting isn't a thing that people are familiar with, and so it's kind of like not sharing that so much because there's not enough confidence to be like, yeah, I'm doing a podcast and kind of own that creative outlet. Um, but I've had the experience of being in groups where, like the Female Entrepreneur Association that I've mentioned before, where it's full of other women who are driven and inspired and passionate about what they're doing, and we're all there lifting each other up, which has been amazing. Like, I probably working for yourself on your own thing is so rewarding, but so hard when it becomes you're responsible for everything, like learning everything, physically doing everything that's involved in it, and so, yeah, having a group around you who understand that and can support you is really important.
Yeah, that's one thing I found is there are certain groups on Facebook where it's a lot like Twitter, where it's all about me, 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 me. And I will either get invited into the group, which is a weird thing that Facebook does. Somebody will invite you, but then you go and check and you're automatically in it. And it's like, okay, great. And then they'll put up a message of, "Hey, Emily, welcome to the group. Tell us a little about yourself." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I didn't wanna do that, just kinda wanted to lurk for a while, see how you guys work," and I'll look at all the posts, and it's all just, like, these long posts of, "Are you tired, run down,
Yeah,
listless?" Y
yeah.
and it's like, why are people not making these connections? Like, that's gotta be the best way to not only promote anything you're doing, promoting your podcast, or whether you're promoting your business, whether you're even promoting yourself or something you're passionate about, is just going out, making those connections, having the interactions with people who like the same things that you do, because in the long run, those are going to be your best audience, your best clients, your best friends eventually is when you have that connection.
Yeah, I think there's making connections and then there's like actual engagement. So where you actually do something of value, whether that be find what is in common and talk about that, or actually ask someone how they're going, or not just your random, yeah, self-serving kind of pushy post thing to try and rope in people, and they can be a little bit manipulative too because there's an ulterior motive that goes on there, so it's navigating that is a little bit of a challenge, and it could be a nightmare, I guess, for some people, but when you do find those groups that you align with and you find value in and you wanna support, then go all in, I say.
Yeah, and it's even funny because there's a way, that I learned to really optimize Facebook so that you don't have to be salesy, but people still can find out about you.
Mhm.
And it's really smart. It's called a profile funnel. So what you do is you optimize your profile to have not only your picture, your face, so people have that face associated with you. And then for things like the featured photos, you have the things that you're doing. So for my featured photos, I have my business logo, and if you click on it, you get to the link to take you to my business and you find out about it. And then I have my podcast logo, and you can click on that and see the link to go to my podcast, and people find out about that. So when you're talking to them in these groups and you're making those connections, people like to stalk. So they go to your profile and they see those things. And if it's something that they're interested in, that's when, I'll get a DM from that person and be like, oh, I see you're into podcasting and I'm thinking about doing that. And I mean, just making those connections so organically, not pushing it on them, not saying, I do this and this and I am awesome and you need to connect with me. And well, why don't you do that? And you'll see that in Facebook groups of people asking leading questions, being like, what do you find you're spending the most time on in your podcast? And when you click on their profile, you see that they are a podcast manager or a social media marketer. And you're like, don't go poaching for clients in a Facebook group, trying to make conversation and just trying to get leads on stuff like that. And it's gross. And once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. And now I want to respond angrily. And I'm like, oh, what takes the most time? Going through my Facebook feed and seeing these gross little grabs at attention for clients for you. Like
Yeah.
it's awful.
Yeah. I think there's been comments about that some people aren't in any Facebook groups because they weren't welcoming or friendly, but the thing is that, like, what I found is that actual audience groups of other podcasts and things, or smaller groups that people have set up to try and get away from those big ones, um, and like the Underdog Podcast community, sorry,
Yeah.
is one where their intentions were to be welcoming and friendly and help each other, um and so and I think someone mentioned that they were in I think it was Chris Carlson from the Podcasting Couch. He goes and hangs out with the audiences from the people he's interviewed, and they are amazing communities. So they don't have to be the 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 big name ones or anything like that. If you just find a group of people that either like the same podcast might be a good thing, and then you can maybe ask a question in there and someone might be able to help you, or just hang out with people who like the same stuff as you, and then that can be fun.
Exactly, and it seems so simple, but for some reason right now uh, you don't see that as much, and especially if you just start a podcast and you want to get listeners and you kind of there are people who just don't care how. So someone will put up a post of, I need a new true crime podcast, and somebody will put up, well, we do a comedy podcast, but we mentioned this serial killer in this episode of my podcast, da da da. It's like, come on, just have a conversation with somebody. People like remember how to do that. Remember going up to people. I mean, I never did that because I was an introvert, but remember how you could just have conversations with people and get to know them. And that's one of the things I love is the private Facebook groups for people's
Yeah.
podcasts. I see those more now on my timeline than I do the bigger groups for just podcasting in general because well I think Facebook got the message that I never will respond anymore to questions about who's your favorite hosting service, what microphone should I use. It's like, no, Emily doesn't want that. She wants to see everything that Nick posts in restaurant so that she gets hungry at all hours of the day even though she's just eaten or
And I have to hang out with Nick tomorrow, and we're gonna talk about food, and I'm gonna have to eat first because I don't know if I can get through an hour.
I know. And they're talking in the chat room about Discord, and I really need to check it out. But that's the thing, it's like it's
All of the
another
groups and
thing.
being everywhere is kind of a huge thing too, right? And so I have been in part of some of the bigger groups and things, and I don't actually hang out there and spend a lot of time there. I'm just part of them. So if I
Yeah.
wanted to use their search function, I can go back and find something that's relevant to me because I am not one of those people who will post my question that 10 million other people have asked because I'm an introvert too. I don't actually want people to know that I'm asking that question. I'll secretly do my own research in the background. But yeah, the Discord thing is amazing. It's a little out there because it's kind of like a gaming platform voice chat thing. So it's probably quite big in those kind of communities rather than podcasting. But I have found because I am a member of Bandry's One for Podcasters, and even that though on his YouTube channel he has quite a generally speaking, I mean, there's still trolls and other things like that, but there's a good community of people there who answer questions or reply to things. But in the Discord server itself, there is a dedicated bunch of people who are in there who are passionate about it and interested and um, having fun, and then, like, getting to talk to people is fun because, like, I like watching people on a Facebook Live or something, but it's still a one-way kinda street, whereas the voice chat, we can all hang out, and it's like we're with each other, but not there, and we can't see each other, so we could be, I don't know, however comfortable we are, but still get to
You could be
hang out.
like I was you could be like I was an hour ago in a hoodie and just, like, asking my husband, "Hey, did we brush our teeth today?" He's like, "No, we sure didn't." I'm like, "Oh my god."
Quick
Finding that
project.
out about working from home is like, wow, I really can be so lazy if I don't have to get dressed. So
Yeah, that's one of the things from working from home, right? And I was talking about that with Gillian yesterday, is kind of the boundaries sort of blur a little bit between you can spend all of your time working then, and but you've still got your family and things that you need to kind of fit in, and your dental hygiene and your and eating and all of that stuff. I'm just bringing that up because it was so funny from from our last thing. But yeah.
I I had to put a timer on my phone to eat, to remind me to eat, because if not, I will just work I'll work through lunch, I'll work through like 3 o'clock until my husband's just like, "Hey, I have to go to work now." And then I'll be like, "Oh my I can't believe you have to go to work." And then he has to ask me, "Did you eat? Are you hangry? Do you want me to get you some toast before I leave for work? Are you sure you're I'm fine. I'm fine. No, you're not."
Yeah, I think it's definitely a balance, and I have the same thing because I work from home too. So it's yeah, making sure that you fit in the important things that will help get you through and give you the energy to do all the amazing things that you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's so I had to set a timer. I had to start like having protein snacks around because that'll keep me in a better mood and more focused too. That's a big thing I knew would be a problem working from home is having that focus. And it's funny because at this point, sometimes my husband's the only person I talk to, but because I'm editing other people's podcasts, I feel like I get that social interaction all day because I'm hearing people's voices. And then I'll go up to talk and I'm like, "Oh my god, I haven't talked all day." I felt like I did, but
Yeah. Um, just on that, like with the editing and stuff, you're also doing. Are you still doing the strategy sessions with ePodcast Productions?
yeah, those are I think those are my absolute favorite. As much of an introvert and afraid of strangers as I am, because I get to talk about podcasting, I warm up to people right away. And as soon as I hear there's sort of the things that are holding them up or holding them back, I just my maternal instinct kicks in and I'm like, "It's okay, honey. We can fix this. Let me show you all the ways we could fix this." And I love it. Oh my gosh, I love talking to people about their podcasts. And for the most part, the strategy sessions haven't been people who already have a podcast. The majority of them are people thinking about starting a podcast and worried about this wall of tech. And I have to tell them it's not that hard. Like, we'll get you a microphone. It won't be a $400 thing. You're not gonna have to worry about having to buy a new laptop, all this stuff. Like, we can get you started because what like let's my big thing is passion in podcasting just because being able to talk about what you love is so energy like it gives you energy and it fulfills you and having that wall of scary tech thing blocking you is just, I mean, that's a hurdle that as soon as you pass over it, people go flying.
Yeah.
They're like, "Oh my gosh, I wanna record a podcast, and I wanna record another one, I have an idea for another podcast, and maybe I want a podcast network," and then I have to tell them, I'm like, "No, you don't." Like, let's just focus on you don't want a network. I've seen people who run networks. It's not pretty.
Yeah. One of the fun thing was because I had a call with you at the end of last year, which was amazing for me because I was I'd started in August and I got to the point where I wasn't quite sure how I was gonna go forward and, you can get a little bit burnt out by it too when you are throwing all this energy and effort into it, but then, uh I think you said that I reminded you of yourself because I was getting really excited and I was sort of doing all these bonus episodes and things, and you gave me the idea of just keeping them keeping it to the podcast and kind of putting them somewhere else, but what I really loved was that you took the time to look at what I was doing and really understand it, and you got me and you gave me valuable advice that was actually something that I could and would use because it aligned with what I was aiming for in the first place. So your ability to connect with other people and understand them and then offer that maternal support and things is just amazing.
And I love hearing that. That's so sweet of you to say. And then, I think one of my favorite things actually, this happened when I talked to Harriet, who's the eating coach, and I started talking to her, was our first session together. She said, I know you've read all the diet books. I know you've listened to all the podcasts about it, but the reason that having a coach or a consultant is different is because this is tailored to you. This is not eating coach for everybody. This is Emily's eating coach. And just having her say that, I was like, that's what I want to do. That's exactly how I want to do my strategy sessions and I want to do my coaching because I mean, I've had people who are like, "Oh, well, you're free now. Can we have a
Yeah.
conversation?" I'm like,
No.
"No, I have to do some digging and stalking you. Like, don't mind me. I'm just going to stalk all the things that you do and then come and talk to you about your show." And being able to do that and coming to them with these like actionable ideas, not just saying, "Well, stats don't matter. You're fine." It's like, no, people want to see those changes. They want to actually do a little bit of work now that'll save them in the long run and that'll help them um
Go forward.
increase their yeah, go forward. Not just increase their audience, but make their show optimize their show, I guess, and make it just the best that it can absolutely be. So yeah, those are
Yeah.
so much fun.
Did you know Harriet before? Bec
I I didn't know, and I forget because I know you knew her, and she, I think, DM'd me and
So
was
what
like,
that was a
yeah,
cool story on Connection because she was actually looking for a mastermind group, and she'd mentioned that she had the health coaching thing, and so she already had one of those. She wanted one specifically for podcasting kind of thing, and I think it was on podcasting, yeah, and I don't know how I found her, but I found her anyway, joined her mastermind thing. She had kind of like a schedule that she wanted to keep, and then she mentioned about no, I just suggested because 'cause I'd had my call with you, and I said, "Hey, Emily Prokop is amazing. You should definitely get in touch with her because you were calling for people at that time to come and have a strategy session with you." And I I think that was from her mentioning the health coaching thing, and you were talking about that you wanted it or something. I don't know. Anyway, I put her on. Well, maybe not. Maybe I just
there
said
was
she should come and have
definitely
a
a
strategy
connection
session.
there.
Yeah,
I remember her like just getting the DM from her and saying, "Oh, well, Heather mentioned that
yeah,
you're doing strategy sessions," and I was looking for testimonials
yeah.
at the time. And Adam, yes, if you want an Emily session, I'm still looking for testimonials, dude. Plus, I love you, so we can, yeah, we'll do that definitely. And and so I talked with her and then she was saying how she was looking for testimonials too, and I was like, "Well, hi. I kind of love food. I mean, I'm not gonna brag, but I did just finish a whole garlic bread loaf by myself tonight." So, but so I was able to talk to her, and now she's my eating coach. And don't tell her about the garlic bread, but
Okay.
you know. So just and having that connection, being able to talk to her every week, and we kind of do a trade off of I talk to her about podcasting, and she talks to me about eating, and it's so nice to just have that out there and know that there is support out there for anything that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Is because it's so easy to say I can do this myself, but that's actually going to hinder you in any way. So being able to ask for help, being able to go out and talk to people and have them as a sounding board. And that's one of the things I kind of love about the strategy sessions. A lot of the time I'm not the one talking and they're talking to me and so then at the end for 5 minutes I'm like, "Okay, so you mentioned this, let's do this. You mentioned this, and this. Let's try this." And so being able to do that is just it's so rewarding and I love it.
Yeah, that's the same thing that I have with Gillian, who was on yesterday, 'cause, uh, we were accountability partners, but then things that she does now, like, she is going through a health coaching course, and so she needs someone to help beta test it for her, and so I am that person, so I'm benefiting because I have the accountability and learning from her for the training that she's doing, and then I'm supporting her so that she can get it done and get it ticked off. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
which is
having
really
that accountability, and I mean, that even goes back to getting to know Nick in the very beginning is just like, we both released I would release Classy Little Podcast on Wednesday mornings. He releases Epic Film Guys on Thursday mornings. We would text each other if we were on our way to work that day and the episode didn't come up, and I would text him on Thursday mornings and be like, Where are you? What are you doing? I can't leave my driveway until this downloads because I'm not using my data to download your like 2-hour podcast. I love you, but I need this up." And he'd be like, "Oh my god, I'm still editing. Stop it, woman."
That's awesome. Yeah. I've enjoyed that too because when it has been tough and I'm not quite sure and things, just having someone to ask or them saying, "You can do this, you've got this," I believe in you and things, it makes a world of difference.
It really does, and especially I mean, it's not always even looking for praise, it's
No.
looking for just that faith in you that they
Yeah.
know that you can do that.
Yeah.
Nick's like, "It's true, it's all true." If there's a reason I call him my pod husband is because, like, we like, we did have that nagging relationship, just like, "Where are you? Come on."
I'm waiting.
I know, I'm like, "It's Thursday morning, 7 a.m. I really need to leave for work, and I will happily be late because" it's really becoming clear why I got that pink slip of just like, I can't leave. I didn't Epic Film Guys didn't download yet.
I hope you're grateful. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. It's an amazing friendship that you have, and, he said he's received more than one text message on a Thursday
Yeah.
morning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing that you have that connection with Nick and that you are, despite being an introvert perhaps, but you still have a care and an interest in supporting other people doing what they wanna do, and that radiates with ePodcast production. So I wish you all the very best for it, and I am so grateful that I got to meet you in the beginning because you really helped me sort of lift me up and feel like it was something that I should definitely do. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. No, of course you should. And that's the thing is just being able to watch you flourish. And all of a sudden after our strategy session, it was like, we have a special guest this week. It's Heather Welch. And you were on all these shows. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so like I love her so much. I'm so happy for her.
But that's the thing, is that I really wanted, well, I value what you have to say anyway, but what you gave me was so useful, and I put it into action straight away. I mean, you gave me a whole list of things to do, it was incredible. And then it also gave me the confidence to do it because I'd had that idea of making connections this year. That's what 2018 is all about for me, and I hope that, I mean, I tried to book flights earlier, but it didn't work out, but I hope to book flights and come over there and meet a whole bunch of people because you all are amazing, and to be able to meet you in real life would be even more amazing.
I know, and I'm staring at you, Nick, right now because you are 4 hours away from me and we haven't met yet. And meanwhile, Heather is looking at flights. I'm just saying. But
No pressure.
no pressure. But one of the things I was thinking of actually when my book comes out is sort of doing I would have to pay for a book tour. I don't think my
Yeah.
publishing company is not going to do that, but actually kind of doing sort of a trek around New England in my car and just going to different listeners. even houses and being like, "Hey, do you want to have a game night? Let's schedule a game night. I will drive to your house. We'll have a game night or take the train or something like that just to celebrate like the book. I don't have to sit there and read it and be awkward and be like, "Let me sign your book." It's like, "No, I just want to go out and meet listeners who I know are close by and who are all really supportive of the book too. Like that, it's kind of amazing. I didn't think I would get any signups for the email that I have. I have an email list now of, hey, if you want to find out about the book, um sign up for the email. And all of a sudden, like I actually have people who I've never heard from before. Like never heard from, who I have no idea who they are. They're signing up for the book email. And I'm like, this is amazing. You know, you really do you find that out and so it's so awesome. I'm
Yeah.
excited. Nick's like, meanwhile, Justin reminds me all the time of how amazing meeting Emily was. That's right. I met Justin, your co-host, who lives 6 hours away from me. So
So we need to work on that. There needs
yeah.
to be a connection made there.
I know. I keep telling him when it gets warmer, we're gonna find like a brewery halfway between the two of us that we can hang
Nice.
out at one day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I don't know how you're going for time. Are you all right?
I'm good. However, you're letting me procrastinate editing, so I'm
Oh,
good.
oh.
It's fine.
Maybe we should get back to work. That's one thing that's been amazing this week for the week of live streams. Working from home, I've been able to be really flexible and put
Yeah.
everything outside of it so I can make it happen. But for me, these connections were worth celebrating and worth spending a week on because they've meant a lot to me. They've helped me a lot. I've enjoyed supporting everybody else as well, and so I really appreciate you being a part of it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, if you I'm pretty sure everybody in the live chat knows where to find you, but if you wanna let them know where they can find you, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so I'm at thestorybehindpodcast.com, and that's for my podcast. And if you're interested in what I'm doing in my business, that's at epodcastproductions.com. Because again, I picked a name because I had 3 or 4 days when I realized I was starting a business before going to a podcast conference. And I was like, I need to put this all together right away. So I'm just going to go with the first name that pops into my head. My first name starts with E Podcast Productions. Perfect. I didn't even realize how much Google loves that. It was like, oh, you have podcast and productions right in the title. Okay, great. We're going to promote you. So that helps.
That's perfect. It was efficient. That was really well done.
Yeah. Yeah, Nick, I never procrastinate while editing. No, I don't. And that's the funny thing is we would text each other while editing too, just to kind of when we both had co-hosts, you know, just you'll never believe what James is doing tonight. All of his lip smacks are just driving. I quit. I'm gonna quit.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much to everybody who's come by the live chat today to hang out with me and Emily. It's been really fun seeing you there. And for anyone who missed it live, there's this amazing chat with Emily and there's other ones from the week that was. We've got a couple more coming up. And yeah, Emily, you must I am on your email list, so I will know when the book is due to come out. But if you have a book launch or something, then let me know and I will see what I can do
Yay.
because
Yeah.
that would be incredible to be there.
Yeah. Well, one of my friends who's all about party planning, she's like, we could have a book launch. And I know she's thinking the Sex in the City book launch with like the 2-story bar and bubbles. And I'm like, not gonna be that kind of book launch. It's gonna be at like bar trivia. That's like where this book is going.
We're going
So
with the trivia buff. So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it'll be at a gym or something like that. And then I'll walk in and they'll be like, you don't belong here. No, no, no.
Stop
And I'll be
it.
like, fine. Eat another whole thing
It's
of garlic bread.
shh. Harriet might be listening.
Yeah, Harriet, it was garlic, gluten-free crackers, toast, carrots. That's it.
Carrots.
Garlic carrots. That's my favorite.
This has been wonderful, Emily, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye. That was the amazing Emily Prokop of the Story Behind Podcast and ePodcast Productions. She is a wonderful person and she's doing amazing things. I can't wait for the book launch. I can't wait to see how ePodcast production goes and all the amazing connections that she makes there. Thanks to everybody who came by live. That wraps up the live streams for today. Tomorrow I will be catching up with Nick Haskins. Well, catching up, meeting. I haven't met Nick on video or anything apart from Twitter and all the other places that we've messaged each other. So I'm looking forward to that one. Make sure you eat something or have food with you because you may get hungry. I look forward to seeing you then.